Are your render settings slowing down your renders without adding extra quality? Let's find out. Stay tuned. What's up, survivalists? It's Shay from Team W&J here. In this video, I'm gonna make it my priority to shave off at least 1 second from your renders without having to buy new hardware. If you're new here, I upload new videos just like this on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So subscribe now and hit that bell icon to not miss a single upload. If you're returning, welcome back. It's great to see you again. Make sure you leave a comment so I can remember who you are. Let's try to get this video up to 10 likes. On to the video. Boom. Alrighty, so here we are in Cinema 4D. There was a bit of confusion last time around, so let me make it very clear. These videos are aimed specifically for the standard render in Cinema 4D only. Cool, with that out of the way, here's the scene we'll be rendering. So for the basic render settings, I'm setting the resolution to 1920 by 1080 at 72 DPI. My frame rate is going to be at 24 to reduce the amount of frames I have to render. I only have one effect, and it's the one effect that I use universally no matter what I'm working on, and that's Ambient Occlusion. Ambient Occlusion gives your scene a more natural, realistic look by adding tiny little shadows where edges meet. And you can see this in real life when you look in like the corner of a room or something. It's very likely that you guys are going to be using it as well, so here's some tips on how to optimize it. And if you're not using Ambient Occlusion, use Ambient Occlusion. It is literally the only one effect that you absolutely need. To save some render time on AO, turn the max ray depth down until you start seeing a drop in quality. I was able to save 1 second by dropping the max ray depth from 100 to 60. And I was able to save 2 seconds by dropping it down to 30, but I felt that the quality had decreased too much. Alrighty, so what are the other effects that I use, and when, and why? Let's find out. The second one you guys should be aware of is Global Illumination. If you've been on the channel long enough, you know I think Global Illumination is a waste of time. You can achieve nearly the same result by using ambient lights. It takes a bit more work to set up, but it saves a lot more time in the long run. This isn't always the case, as sometimes the ambient light just isn't cutting it and I have to fall back to GI. But I find that more often than not, that usually happens when I'm doing my visual effects stuff. Next up is depth of field, or in my case, ZBlur. I can't say how to optimize the default depth of field because I don't use it. But if you use ZBlur, something you can do to shave off some render time is change the blur type from lens to simple. This will make the blur less realistic and you lose the nice bokehs, but it has the potential of saving up to a full second. Next effect is glow. This causes everything you're seeing to bloom a little with light to make it feel more realistic. Slows down rendering a slight bit, but there isn't much you can do about it. Same goes for the object glow effect. This one doesn't even have options for you to fiddle with, so go figure. You need this if you have glowing materials in your scene. Again, not much you can do with it. Okay, next up is Caustics. This is for when you want white light to pass through green glass, for example, and end up projecting green light. Alright, a big tip here to save render time is to perhaps not use Caustics at all. That being said though, this only applies if your light is passing through one solid color. So say for example I got this big blue window and that's it. Instead of using Caustics, I can simply change the light color to blue and then make it exclude the actual window mesh. Of course, that's why it only works with one solid color. If you got an image like the glass in the prologue of Levisler, for example, that ain't gonna work so well and you're gonna need Caustics. And third, no, fourth, fifth, lost count. Next one, lens effects. Did you know you can actually save 100% of render time on lens flares by simply not using them?
Wow.
But if you really insist on using your lens flares for whatever reason, there's not really much you can do to optimize it, but I mean, it shouldn't take too long to render anyway. Now there we have it. Half the video done. Yep, that's just the render settings, but that's not all. The way you set up your scene itself is also very important. First, let's talk about polygons. All 3D objects are made up of polygons. If we look at this cube here, cubes have 6 faces and you might think this is 6 polygons, but it doesn't. Let's press NB in our viewport here to show the wireframe. As you can see, I've subdivided it and each face is being cut up 4 times. This means there are a total of 64 polygons. Now, if I were to divide this again like crazy to 50 times, I would have 125,000 polygons. Let's see how they render. For 6 polygons, it takes 0 seconds. For 64 polygons, it also took 0 seconds. For 125 million polygons, it takes 2 seconds. As you can see, the more polygons you have, the longer it will take to render. But of course, nobody renders a floating cube in space. Let's chuck in a light because lighting is next. When you have a light in, naturally you want to turn shadows on, where you'll be prompted with 3 options. Soft shadows give a natural result and have a decent render time. You've also got a lot of options to play with to give you the right result. Not to mention, there's a resolution setting right here that you can dial up or down depending on what you want to prioritize, speed or quality. Hard shadows are next. These give completely solid shadows that aren't as realistic. They do render a lot faster though. Finally are area shadows. These take the longest but give the most realistic result. The shadows closer to the object appear harder and gradually get softer as it trails off. This here are the default area shadows. As you can see, they look no different than the hard shadows but take 7 seconds longer. To save render time using area shadows, turn the accuracy down to 25%. Then start turning your max samples down until you start seeing fireflies. Those are the weird noise specks that you see that crushes renders. As you can see, I was able to bring the render time down to 16 seconds by lowering my max samples to 16. This looks no different than before, or compared to the hard shadows. Another thing with lights are the visible light options. Invisible light will render faster for obvious reasons, but you can actually optimize your visible lights. For instance, if you just need light and it doesn't need to be intercepted by anything, set the visibility mode to visible. However, if it does get intercepted, you're going to need to set it to volumetric. Don't know what inverse volumetric is for, haven't touched it, haven't needed to. While we're still on lights, area lights in particular take longer to render. To optimize your lights, go into the details tab of your area lights and lower down its samples until you see fireflies. Now, I find that more often than not that I'm not even using area lights. So if your renders are taking a bit too long, consider swapping out the area with something else. Alright, so we're done with the lights. Let's move on to the other stuff that we want in our scene. For me, that's the sky and the environment. Now, the sky is just a sky. It shouldn't take that long. If you're using a physical sky and it's taking too long, consider switching it to a sky instead. Alternatively, just be me and chuck an HDRI image on the background. As for the environment, not much you can do about that, and you shouldn't really be lagging on environment anyway. Next is materials. These are the textures. Holy shit, I just made another 15-minute video. So sorry guys, but you're gonna have to wait till next week for me to cover materials. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to see more episodes of Levelsleer faster, don't forget to check out our Patreon. Patreon is a service that allows you to support creators like us by pledging an amount you choose every month. So if you've got $1 to spare, do check out one of our awesome pledges on Patreon. Cheers!